we do a combination. So I look at it as I'm an opportunistic investor, and I look at the way I fund my deals. There's different tools. So, I've syndicated a few deals, utilize that tool, joint venture deals, again, hard money investor. So, of the gamut. And, I don't want to say any one is better than another. Each deal we look at, we run through all the processes. Okay, which tool is going to be the best for this deal?
Welcome to the How to Scale Commercial Real Estate Show. Whether you are an active or passive investor, we'll teach you how to scale your real estate investing business into something big.
Colby, welcome to the show.
Sam, glad to be here, bud. Thanks for having me on.
Hey, man, the pleasure's all mine. Where are you based out of?
I currently live in Steamboat Springs, Colorado.
That's fantastic, man. That is fantastic.
It's horrible. It's horrible. Yes.
Well, I hear it's what, we're recording this on October 12th, and you said you guys are getting 5 inches of snow today.
That's what they're calling for. Yes.
My goodness, man. That's fantastic. Well, hats off to you. It's probably 90 here in the South today. And we won't be seeing snow probably all year long. So, good for you for sticking it out in weather like that. That's awesome. The same questions I ask everybody who comes on this show, Colby. Can you quickly tell us, where did you start? Where are you now? And how did you get there?
Yeah. So I started, like you mentioned, I started back in 2001 with single family homes, just like everyone else, right? Because we didn't have really a lot of the internet back then. Social media, there wasn't a lot of, the information for commercial real estate wasn't as readily available as it is today. So I bought my first single family home, which I actually lived in, my primary residence, while I was still active duty military, and caught the bug. And obviously 2001, we were attacked, and so the enduring freedom, Iraqi freedom, all that kicked off for the last 20 plus years. And I was deploying quite a bit and saving money. So instead of going out and buying new vehicles, I started, hey, I want to buy property. So I bought other single family homes, and then realized that, holy crap, that's a lot of work. I was trying to manage them while working, while deploying, because my first set of bad advice I ever received was you need to manage them yourself because you're losing 10%. Right. Well, yes, I'm losing maybe 10% of gross profit, but I'm losing about 90% of my freedom at that point. So I was like, third property management, way to go. No regrets. And then, fast forward to when I retired, I knew I wanted to not work the corporate world, even though I tried that for about a year or so when I got out. I wanted to get into commercial real estate, but I just how do I do this? And, just started really educating myself. And so, like I said, I retired back in 2016. And, I think my tipping point was, I bit the bullet and said, you know what, I'm going to, I was listening to all these podcasts and stuff. And I was just like, I'm going to go to one of these boot camps or these conferences. And I went, and the light bulb went off. I was like, oh, wow, I can do this. I don't have to have, a lot of money or high net worth or an uncle that has all that. It's helpful. Don't get me wrong. I wish I did. But, I realized it is, I can put in the work. It's not rocket science. It's a process. And being in the military, coming from that military background, we're all about processes. It kind of really sunk or came together. And I bought into a coaching program, mentorship, and man, I just yes, I retired in 16. I didn't take the plunge until August of 2018. February of 2019 is when I invested in my first multifamily. And so since February of 2019 to today, we just closed on our fourth property a couple months back, and I'm sitting around 642 doors. I've sold off all my multifamily except for one.
Single family or multifamily?
I'm sorry?
Single family?
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I sold off all my single family. Yes. Okay. Oh, gee, yeah, no, I'm keeping all my multifamily.
Got it.
Sold off all my single family homes. I strictly own all multifamily. And the first deal I ever did solo, I'm actually going first full circle on. And it was a condo complex, 15 units, did a bunch of upgrades to it. wasn't the best. We can talk about that a little bit later as part of some mistakes and lessons learned, if you will. But we are in a current, we've separated them out. We're selling them off individually as single family homes. Under contract right now for 9, just closed on one last week, got one closing tomorrow, and then 7 more over the coming weeks. And then we got 5 on the market right now to finish, 6 to close them out. So really excited about that. And we'll gross about $1 million.
That's awesome.
And bought that property in December of 2019. So less than 2 years.
Wow, that's fantastic. That's a lot of moving pieces there. And I guess while we're on the topic, because the likelihood I remember to come back to this in 15 minutes is low. So the condo complex, you bought 16 units. Were they all vacant? What was the story on them? I mean,
it was 15 units, and it was built in 2007, or it's when they broke ground. Developer went out of business. Somebody went in and bought it, rented it out as an apartment building, just as individual units. Right. They went out of business, lost on it. And then another investor I bought it from picked it up, didn't do anything with it. And then so I bought it, and we turned around and, I saw because the way it was set up, they were set up to be sold off individually, but never were. Right. So from the beginning, I was always looking at that as my secondary plan. My primary is to hold on to it long term. I want to buy and hold on to things 20 plus years. But when we hit the $1 million equity mark on it, it was a no brainer to go ahead and try to sell it and basically reutilize that capital into bigger and in other deals. So,
so those were all they were already individually deeded. I mean, so when you bought it, you had 15.
No, so they had not quite got to that part. So they all had their own 911. They had, they were set up. All we did is in the last year, we went and it cost quite a bit of money, but we had to go through, got the architectural plans, did a big horizontal regime change is what they call it. And basically, which is deeded them out. And then we created an HOA or a POA, is we're Property Owners Association in this state, and this is in Arkansas. And you got all that in place. And instead of when we marketed it as a whole package and as individual. And the whole package is we were going to sell it for a little bit less than what we knew we could get it for market. Sure. But if we didn't hit our numbers, we're just like, whatever, this is what we're doing. You give us this offer, or we're just going to sell them off individually. And we had a lot of lowball offers, of course, and folks coming in, and we had some get close, but we're just like, no, here's our number. And so we once we got the first one under contract, we're like, sorry guys, last chance. Here's the number. You hit it, or we're pulling it off the market as a package. Nobody came back in. We had one group hit it, but it was their first time buying a property. So no track record, and didn't feel confident closing with them, and actually making it to closing because they didn't have a sponsor or anything. So we just said, thank you, no thank you. And then, we're selling them off individually, and I'm really excited about that.
There's a lot of questions I have in that process. Like, why do you think no one has done that up to this point? I mean, it sounds like an asset that's just kind of floundered for 13 or 14 years. Why has no one gone to the efforts that you have just to turn this into what you've done with it?
I've asked myself that same question, because when I was looking at this, I had a lot of naysayers, because I took it now as an apartment building, 15 units. It was not the best deal, right? I mean, the numbers were good, right? But my plan was to hold on to it long term, and I knew where I could get it to, and it would work for a long term hold. But I also looked at it as a backup. I'm like, man, the market's going up. It's 1 mile away from the University of Arkansas. It's 1 block from the free bus line. It's on a core trail that for biking and walking. It's on a creek. It's all these pluses. But yet, I think is people weren't. Oh, and here's the other thing. I found this deal on LoopNet.
Wow.
Right. Right. Where the deals go to die. So I was like, that is not the case. So I just think people were looking at it as face value. But when I talked to the broker and started looking at and dove into this deal, I realized like, what, man, I've got multiple exit strategies, because there's 3 buildings. I'm like, I could sell 1 building off and keep 2. There's so many different ways to go with student housing. I started looking, all those the different aspects. I'm like, man, I said, there really isn't a lose-lose. And so even with all these naysayers and stuff, just went ahead and took the plunge. And yeah, and it's worked out.
Yeah, sounds like it. I mean, you're making, a gross profit of roughly $60,000 a unit, it sounds like. So
Yep.
there's nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that at all. And I think it's interesting, that obviously your goal is to buy and hold, but of course looking at through it with a different lens and saying, okay, maybe there's some other things we can do with this to turn a profit out of this.
Yep.
I've got some questions for you about the offer that you turned down, right? They met your number. What are some things that buyer could have done to have had you maybe have more confidence in them as a buyer?
If they would have brought in a partner that had a resume, that had done it before, that could, give us the confidence that they could get to closing, and that's what a lot of people, I think don't really, and even I got into this is when you're making an offer, whether you're buying or selling, something to remember as you're say, if go, and I've seen this all the time. I've won out a number of deals and I didn't have the best offer. Right. And it goes back to is it's not always about the money. It's about the package. Can you get to closing? Just because and the reason being is, like, say, they hit my number, but then, it's 60 to 90 days. I pull this off market. I've got all this holding costs and, they don't qualify for a loan. Whereas if I could have taken maybe $100,000 less, went with somebody else that has that nice proven track record, we go to close. Well, guess what? Yeah, I'm still I may still come out ahead because I don't have 90 days worth of holding costs, headaches, whatever the case may be, starting all over again, time loss. So, keeping that in mind is when you're going forward, and it's always important, I think, is to partner, especially starting out, is partner with somebody with some experience with that track record. And like I said, we passed on the deal recently and we didn't have the best offer. They came back, they didn't accept, but they countered and they're like, listen, you guys didn't have close to the best offer, but we had a track record. We were already in this market. They knew us. Because I came with my team, everybody on my team was known by the sellers and the broker representing the sellers. And they're just like, wow, these guys are great. Let's go back and try to work with these. They counted. We just couldn't come to an agreement because, yes, number is still important when you're buying. But, you got to look at is what is their pain point, and having that track record. Can you close or not?
Right. Tell me, how did you guys fund this condo opportunity? And then want to ask that same question as it pertains to your multifamily holdings.
Yeah. So this one we have private money lender, investor, excuse me. So basically a hard money loan through a private investor. And that's how we went to a bank. So it's it's a non-recourse loan that we received and got a private private investor, and we were able to close. That was good, and it was also bad. Bad because we were so this deal was my first deal that my partner and I did like by ourselves. So we were KP sponsor, we qualified for the loan, everything. But it was our first deal that we did solo. Right. And went from limited partner and JV in a couple of smaller deals to this deal. And looking back, I'm glad I did it, because I also go back as I made a lot of mistakes and I made them early and I'm learning from them. Yes, I'm going to make money on this deal, but it wasn't, there's a lot of stress that has gone in with this deal. If I going back, I would go back and be like, you know what, I want to bring on a JV partner with that money lender. And, I think we could probably, instead of selling it, we may have held on to this property. Honestly, we might have been able to increase the value even more. So it's just that inexperience of wanting to take down a deal, which was good. It was a great confidence booster, but I think we left money on the table, and I think I have more gray hairs and stuff now than I did.
Yeah, but that's the name of the game, right? I mean, I don't know how many of us have done deals where like, gosh, I left a lot of money on the table there. But I mean, there's no trade-off for experience. And you got to do what you got to do. And good for you. You came out still making money. So that's a win-win. Talk to me about your multifamily holdings. I know you said this is your first deal you've taken down as the key principal with you and your partner. How have you taken down your other assets?
And we do a combination. So I look at it as I'm an opportunistic investor, and I look at the way I fund my deals. There's different tools. So, I've syndicated a few deals, utilize that tool, joint venture deals, again, hard money investor. So, I've done, the gamut, and, I don't want to say any one is better than another. It's each deal we look at, we run through all the processes. Okay, which tool is going to be the best for this deal? I will say is because I am a long-term investor, I'm not a huge fan of syndications. They're a necessary tool, but typically you're going to be locked into your business plan, and your investors are expecting you to sell within a certain time frame.
Right.
And so, that's not my goal. I don't want to sell. I want to hold. I want cash flow. That's why I'm in this, for the cash flow. So that's where I like joint venture deals. But $20 million purchase price. I haven't built up my friends, if you will, that I can JV with 5 or 6 folks that we can cover the down payment on a $20 million deal. So we're going to syndicate those deals. So again, it's just I've got a whole mix in the portfolio.
What's it been like? I mean, again, with a shorter track record, what's it been like finding JV partners that can kind of help write those bigger checks?
It's actually been easier than I thought. And I think a lot of that comes by is because we have a process in place. I've aligned myself with some great partners, basically general partners on a deal. So it's in having a track record, coming recommended. I mentor folks. I've just getting out there, being educated, being helpful, and honest. I think that's the biggest thing, and the biggest takeaway we were bred in the military is integrity. So as doing what's right, even when somebody's not looking. And, integrity in the business world is lacking in a lot of instances. So, a lot of, I've turned down investors.
Sure.
I'm like, hey, that have come to me like, hey, I've got, $100,000. This is my first deal. I want to do it. I'm like, no, I'll, if you want to invest, I'm not going to take your $100,000. I'm going to start you at a smaller amount, because we haven't worked well together, or we haven't worked together before. So you don't know me, I don't know you. And I don't want to take your only $100,000, because if I screw this up, I've screwed this up for life. Right. You're never going to invest with me again. And I think that's come out in a positive way, and then we don't sugarcoat. I just had an investor meeting last week, and they're like, hey, we're going to hit our target. And we are on this, we ventured in my first 2 mobile home parks. And we're probably going to miss our target for the first year. The supply chain, it's just, hasn't panned out. Even though we thought we were very conservative, it's not. But I'm like, listen, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. As of today, we're going to miss it.
Right.
But guess what? We know we're going to make it up, and we'll catch you up in year 2. And it's just being on and going, listen, and they appreciate that. They're like, okay, I can deal with that. So now I'm going to expect is I'm not going to give me a nice check for Christmas and not be able, so I'm going to, I'll fund Christmas a different way, so even though they weren't unhappy, obviously they're a little disappointed. I'm disappointed as well, but they appreciate the honesty and the straightforwardness.
And I think that's anybody in business, and I think keeping that honesty and straightforwardness with people, like you should be taking money from people that are aware of what they're getting into, right?
Right.
Like this is business. And I've personally invested in multiple businesses myself, and not all of them have launched out and is my own money in the deal. And you go, well, things didn't work out in the first 12 months like we thought they would. So, that's just, part of what we do. And I think that gets overlooked. So good for you, or does get sugar coated, at least on the front end, with a lot of projections and things where it's like, no, there's real risk we are taking here. So, just making that known up front is really cool. So good for doing that. I love that. Let's shift gears a little bit, and maybe talk a little bit about your nonprofit. Maybe talk a little bit about a recent, small hill you just climbed. Tell us about some of those things and why it is that you do what you do.
Absolutely. No, thank you. I got into real estate and kind of tell you the whole story on how I went from the military to real estate to starting and running a nonprofit, and they're kind of in line with each other. Being in the military, you definitely don't join the military for the paycheck. So it's you leave out of the military, it's you're definitely not a high net worth individual. I mean, are some people, great investors and stuff, but they didn't get it off their military paycheck for the most part. But it's that service before self type deal. I really enjoyed being part of something bigger than myself, and that's what I miss a lot about the military. And so one of the things I wanted to do in the real estate side, and I do with Veteran Pride Investment Group, my company, is, I donate 20% of my profits to veteran and first responder communities. We also, our goal is 10%, and we're sitting right around 4 or 5% right now, but also is trying within our portfolio is setting aside up to 10% of our units for HUD-VASH. And HUD-VASH is basically it's Section 8, but it's specifically for veterans, and it's for veterans that are potentially are at risk of becoming homeless. So there's a lot of parameters, but basically it pays out the same as Section 8, same requirements and stuff. It's just a little bit more segmented, and then the participants, the veterans themselves, have to actually jump through some hoops to qualify. So that's kind of, being that part of something bigger than oneself. Really want to still give back to the community, because I am a wounded warrior. I was injured a couple times in Iraq and Afghanistan, roadside bomb, different explosions. It doesn't, there's more healthy ways to grow up through your 20s and 30s than in a war zone. But all that being said is the money that from my profits wasn't doing enough fast enough and growing quick enough for what I wanted. So my wife and I, we started a nonprofit. We call it the Paper Crane Foundation, because the start of a global pandemic isn't challenging enough for life. So we're like, we're going to launch this at the beginning of a pandemic. So we did. So January of 2019, we went live. We're a 503c, went through all those hoops, and we were supposed to do it last year, but with COVID, everything got pushed off. Our first expedition, if you will, for the Paper Crane was to go to Mount Everest Base Camp. We had to switch gears due to requirements and restrictions, logistics of getting into Nepal. So instead, this year we flew out to Tanzania, and myself and 3 other wounded warriors, a local first responder here from Steamboat, firefighter, paramedic, and then an active duty guy, flew to Tanzania and hiked Mount Kilimanjaro. Literally left the 26th of August, and we got back on the 8th or 9th of September. So literally over a month ago, we got back, still recovering. And it's to raise awareness. So what we do is we're not a destination nonprofit. We're actually a nonprofit, raise money to raise awareness for traumatic brain injury, which most of us suffer from. And also to raise awareness that, listen, there's other veterans and first responders, folks out there that have had concussions that have become counsel locked, and whether due to balance issues, memory issues, or what have you, we want to show that, guess what, you can overcome those. I walked with a cane. I couldn't carry my son up and down stairs. I really didn't bond with my son the first 2 years of his life because I couldn't hold him for fear of falling. They were going to get me a service dog, and was able to find the right help and stuff to, I summited Mount Kilimanjaro a month ago. Yeah, and so we are moving forward. As this kicked off a 5 to 7 year research study, we're trying to increase our make earlier diagnosis of traumatic brain injury more available. Right now, it's very subjective. You go in, follow my finger, and type deal, make it an MRI or something, but it's very subjective. So we're partnering with a few companies that have some devices. And what we want to do is basically get those devices out to urgent cares, emergency rooms to collect data. Because what we're seeing, and a lot of that out there is like it took them 6 years to diagnose my traumatic brain injury. And that seems to be, that 4 to 6 years. And that's a lot of time that could have been rehabilitating and healing. And that's lost time with my son that I'm not going to get back. So, that's the paper crane. Yes, we're starting off with veterans and first responders, but we're going to open it up to, we want to do research for kids, because there's over 8 million concussions in the US alone each year.
Wow. That's really cool. And that's a big overarching why.
Yes.
To what it is that you do. So that's super, super cool that you.
And being in real estate allowed me to take 3 weeks off, working from home, right, to go and do that. I didn't have to take vacation time. I didn't have to coordinate my schedule with a boss. I mean, other than my wife, but she was fully on board. So
right. Understood that. That's fantastic. Colby, I love what you're doing. I love how you're doing it, and just the get it done attitude, and especially overcoming, traumatic brain injuries, and then also turning that on, I'm going to use the phrase and say turning it on its head, but literally to go out and, help others as well that suffered, as you have. So that's fantastic. Thanks for doing that. Is there anything else here before we jump into the final 4 questions that you'd love to share with our audience?
And not that I can think of. I could sit here and talk real estate all day. But we only have a little bit of time left. So now I'll let you take it over.
All right. Sounds great. If I gave you 20 grand to invest in real estate and you had no previous real estate investing experience, what would you do with it and why?
Depending on what you're looking for. That's a really good question. I think you touched on this a little bit earlier. If it's only $20,000, but do you want to do you want to be a hands-on learner or learn from the sidelines? So if you want to be a hands-on learner and you really want to get into this business, I'd say, hey, maybe, let's look at a small joint venture deal to where you can have an active role, and be a part of it, but yet, still have the support and stuff of experienced operators such as myself. Or another one is maybe you want to get into a bigger deal, maybe to help build up a resume, then look at a syndication type deal.
Right. I love that. If you could help our listeners avoid just one mistake in real estate, what would it be and how would you avoid it?
Don't listen to the naysayers. You're going to have them. And that's early on, like I mentioned, I didn't turn it over to professional third-party property management. I tried doing it myself. That was a huge mistake. Now it's like, I don't want the calls at midnight to, that's why property management, I call them and go, give me a status update. How are things going? Oh, you had a leaky toilet. Was it fixed? Yes or no? That's all I care about. Was the tenant taken care of? So, I would say that's the biggest one, especially when you're starting out. Don't listen to friends and family. They're probably the biggest naysayers.
Generally, unfortunately, I believe you're right. Well, I've asked this question already. We've kind of hit on it. The third question is, when it comes to investing in the world, what's one thing you're doing to make the world a better place? And I would assume that's going to be your nonprofit. Yes, sir.
I think that's, our goal is we know with this research and stuff that we're going to actually be able to touch the lives of people worldwide. That's research. So it's not just for one segment. it's going to have big impacts once we get it to where we want it to go.
Fantastic. I love that. Colby, if our listeners want to get in touch with you, what is the best way to do that?
The best way right now, because not that I'm anti-social media, but I'm an older guy and tech isn't my strength. I'm working on that. Trying to get but just email me. That's the best way. So colby.bowers@veteranpride.org. Shoot me an email. I have a website, www.veteranpride.org. There's a way to submit, a sheet and stuff if you have some questions. But if you really want to reach out and you want to get a hold of me and I'm very responsive, is shoot me that email.
Awesome. Colby, thank you so much for your time today. I do appreciate it.
Thanks, Sam. Thanks for having me. This has been fun.
Hey, thanks for listening to the How to Scale Commercial Real Estate podcast. If you can do me a favor and subscribe and leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, whatever platform it is you use to listen, if you can do that for us, that would be a fantastic help to the show. It helps us both attract new listeners as well as rank higher on those directories. So appreciate you listening. Thanks so much and hope to catch you on the next episode.